Hello and welcome to the Social Media Verification Podcast here with Cytrel. My name is Aldi Venturi, Head of Social Media Marketing. Today I will be talking to our CEO, Adrian Britz, about the success the company has had in assisting more than 450 influencers to obtain their verification on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, and other channels. The main tactic was to provide ample notability through news appearance backed by authentic journalism. Adrian, I know you will share a lot of PR tactics in this discussion, but to start with, could you please introduce the company and the concept?
Thanks, Audie, and hello, everybody. We're using a podcast given that our clients are all scattered around the world in different time zones, and I don't actually have the availability to get to everyone via phone and in person. So thanks to our customer audience for using this as a great way to get to know the people who are going to help you to get things done. Cytrel has been around way before social media verification became a trend. We're basically the largest platform in the world for editorial news outreach, and certainly also in the United States. We get your story in with Google News approved media companies, many of them who are mainstream news providers. And of course, editorial news, which is what we help with, is something that's very different from cheap and paid press releases, because when it's editorial, it's endorsed by the news owners and it's published with real journalist profiles who actually worked on the case. So this makes it authentic, it makes it trusted by readers who come across the information anytime in the future.
Can you remind our listeners of the history the platform has with influencers?
Certainly. We've been working hand in hand with influencers and media owners for the last 12 years now. And during this time, when I also worked with LinkedIn for a while, I remember the difficulties that people faced when accounts were impersonated, but luckily also the smiles on their face when they hit influencer status and popularity. Social media verification has a lot of benefits to it, so it's definitely worth anyone's time to look into the facts surrounding it. We started doing Instagram verification for agencies first. They, of course, levied a huge markup on our services. So hence we decided to assist the public directly with this eventually. Given our strong market position to help influencers do this effectively, we've essentially cut out the middleman to deliver this type of value that no agency in London or New York could ever match so far. We're incredibly proud to celebrate the level of achievement we attained with customers. So it's great now to reflect back on all of this today.
Thanks, Adrian. And perhaps you share some insights on the potential value of social media verification and why businesses and individuals do this?
Yeah, that's a good question. Instagram, although there's many other platforms as well, but if you look at Instagram, it's used as a search engine by social shoppers. And Facebook Shops now is a massive new move from the parent company which owns Instagram. So in this regard, I think one of the best examples was the case of J-Brand jeans. The management explained that on Google paid search, it could take roughly $5 million over 3 years to command a substantial share of the global market. But the revenue value would exceed about $20 million, so it's certainly worth that. So even if Instagram could provide them with just 10% of that value, it would be an exceptionally good deal if they could spend $200,000 to obtain verification, as it's going to return approximately $2 million over 5 years. So the reality is that they obtained verification based on PR that costed them less than $7,000 at the time, I believe. Of course, different entities have got their own reasons for wanting to take up verification, but influence can translate directly to revenue, and that matters a great deal for many of our clients.
Yes, as Adrian pointed out, we're dealing with a very wide range of people and organizations who seek verification. I thought sharing some frank insights and advice is the best route to go here. First off, what can you say to people if they ask, is Instagram or TikTok verification for me? Should I do this?
Well, yes, I think straight up advice is what we're known for, and the answer is quite simple. If you're genuinely an influencer, then this is for you. But if you're genuinely not an influencer, then it's probably not for you, unless you're in the process of becoming one, in which case it will require an effort on your part. So in other words, it's not about cheating or gaming the system here, because Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, and all of these channels only seek to really reflect what is real. So whatever is in the real world, they want to reflect that. It's of course worth remembering that much like any legal case where circumstances vary, so is it with social media verification. So perhaps I can explain this by means of an example. Let's say that you're an amazing singer. You sold a lot on Spotify, but you're from a country where English news representation is low, and you live in a small city. So the news media does not know about you yet, even though you have many followers on social media. So when we go and add your story to the media, it really cross-checks quite well with your real situation. So when we embed your YouTube video in the news or an image of a Spotify fan base, it all adds up and it's legitimate. So in that case, it would make you a great candidate for verification.
That is very true from the cases I've worked with, but I also think we've seen numerous other examples, Adrian. Do you think we can say anything about it?
We should discuss this, yes. I can give you a very different example from the previous one, because on the other hand, let's say that you're claiming you're a famous boxer, but you're not. In reality, you just took a few selfies at the gym. Even though you're quite fit from all your workouts, your name was never actually entered into any tournament, or no local boxing club might list you on their website, and you might not have a strong follower fan base either. So in a case like this, you're just adding notability in news media, but it may not be enough, as it wouldn't really be considered a real case, and your chances of verification are much lower. So of course we have seen some people making it seem real by running follower campaigns and getting reliable Wikipedia profiles along with news articles, and they got away with cheating the system. So we certainly have seen it, but it's really not for our company to judge if you're a legitimate influencer or not. Neither is it up to us to try and inspect whether you've got fake followers or not, because that's quite a process. But I do think you should keep in mind that in most cases, people pass verification because the social media platform genuinely believes that they're authentic and notable in the real world, and that's what matters.
I suppose that nobody was born an influencer and everyone had to start somewhere, but what can we say to people who want to get up on the ladder and who are just starting out?
Well, it's true, because nobody was born an influencer. We have also worked with some people who came from nowhere. They had a vision of what they wanted to become, and so we ran some separate audience building campaigns for them first. Some of their stories went viral and even succeeded with Wikipedia acceptance thanks to the media coverage we arranged, and that ultimately secured their verification. Also worth noting that many people have gone to leverage these verified accounts as premium digital assets, and they now resell their influence in numerous ways. Keep in mind though, I would always say this, that these things sell closer to the line of cheating the system, and some people feel critical of this. I would like to think about this differently, of course. It takes work, and it takes effort, and it takes a substantial budget if you come from nowhere, because you're not actually fooling the system, but you are rather investing in yourself to become a legitimate influencer in your own right.
I would say one of the most frequently asked questions is, do you guarantee verification? And can you answer that on record, Adrian?
Yeah, that's a great question too, definitely. Even with the high success rate that our clients see and the fact that you can actually see them all over mainstream news, the reality is that we don't make the decision. Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, and all these Silicon Valley companies are quite independent and they make the decision. These companies are quite powerful. As you've seen, they can even dethrone presidents from countries if they knock back their profiles. So we're not going to put the word out there that we can guarantee their actions, certainly not. So I would say this quite clearly. There is a chance that you will not be approved and that you may need to obtain more PR before getting approved. And in some cases where notability is not the issue, you might never be approved even if you're on CNN, on Fox News, and all these channels 7 days a week. So there is an element of unpredictability with social media owners. If you're a business person and you can live with these facts and you know that the media visibility we get will generate you funds for your business anyway, then it makes a lot of sense and you've got nothing to lose if you spend on your PR. But if you're just starting out now, let's say you're a struggling artist or an athlete and you're using your last savings to finance a PR campaign, there is a chance that you can feel disappointed if you learn that you need more PR in order to achieve a verification. So don't go by the fact that most of our clients are successful with verification. Remember, your situation may be different in terms of who you are and how your notability is perceived. And of course, that these results are not guaranteed.
Thanks, Adrian. Well, I'm sure that some potential clients might leave the podcast now, knowing that they're not quite ready yet for verification. For those who are still listening, though, and who may qualify, can you talk about some of the commonalities between different platforms and their criteria for verification?
Yes, indeed, we can do that. Remember that social media platforms will go by publicly available information. So if the public would read something and regard you as an influencer, then the humans working at Instagram and Twitter will think the same in theory. So this is quite clear when you compare the requirements. Most of them ask for news visibility, and some make it quite clear that if you're going to use one of these subpar press releases that looks like a sponsored campaign, they'll turn you down. They all want authentic news, content about you, and that looks like earned media. Twitter go as far as to say that they want to actually see you have a Wikipedia page, whereas TikTok says that they're essentially the same as Instagram in the sense that they just want to see several news articles, with the exception that you have to apply to Instagram in person. Whereas, of course, with TikTok, they'll automatically detect if a user is in the news, and then they'll verify you themselves if their algorithm agrees to it. So this just means that whatever you do for one platform automatically benefits you for another. I remember when we did the first overlap case, how funny it was. It was an Instagram case, and less than 10 days after the client got verified on Instagram, TikTok has hit them up and verified them. So they've actually hit two birds with one stone. And this is becoming more common these days, which is great, at least, to get more benefit from the campaigns.
There are cases where clients are genuinely influential in one area, but they lack the skill to communicate this to the press. So, are we able to shed some light on how we actually handle these cases?
We can, yes. It's quite simple, really. Let's take the very real example of so many presidents who do not even write their own speeches. They just read it from a set of notes. So PR journalists are essentially those who write a president's speech. They care to understand what would benefit the president's image in the long run, and of course they produce their work accordingly with his approval. So when we take you on as a client, you're the president and we are the journalists and the strategists. So in my office, we've got lawyers, we've got journalists, we've got researchers and creatives, and we all collaborate to produce the best result. So how we do this and the format that it takes, I guess that's our trade secret, which I won't be venturing into right now. But you can rest assured that you'll be well presented in the media, and most cases will have a fair amount of control over what is being said and how it's being said in the media.
Media visibility can also have a lasting impact in several ways. So, can you talk about some of the results people have seen beyond verification?
Yes, we can. We're happy to be driving revenue for clients and not just verification. Recently, we did a tricky verification support case for an alternative medicine and organic brand. Turns out that before we even finished the job, halfway through it, they managed to close a $700,000 B2B agreement. And this was due to some media visibility that got picked up on entrepreneur.com and on International Business Times. So this particular client, they actually spent less than $6,000 to generate that return on investment. So it was quite astonishing, and it came as a total surprise. We did have another client case in financial services. Before his verification case, someone called him a scammer on Reddit. And so despite his good reputation, it was harmed, and he used to lose quite a bit of revenue because of that. And as we ran the campaign and before the end of his job, it turned out that our media articles booted the negative Reddit articles off page 1, and obviously that increased his trust metrics a lot on the web. So there are many other benefits, of course, that comes aside from just verification.
Yeah, I know of many other cases where the PR work had a good return on investment. I suppose this podcast, though, is not the place to give tips on PR blunders. Let's go ahead and talk about any do's and don'ts for verification.
PR blunders? Yeah, actually, I do remember some case studies of PR blunders. The public thinks it's really funny, but as brand ambassadors, we are super careful about it. And what I will say with anything that relates to your social media verification, firstly, keep your account clean, an individual, that your name is clearly reflected in a way that matches your government ID. And this is because ID-linked verification is going to be the future, and platforms are slowly starting to embrace it. So secondly, you want to steer clear from paid articles where it says this is a sponsored article. And for goodness sake, avoid calling yourself an Instagram or a TikTok influencer in the title, because that's just blatantly manipulative and it's not actually going to help towards your aim. If anything, it can make it more difficult for us to have to deal with things like that in the future. Questions of policy, name changes, and so on. I sincerely advise anyone to just read what each social media platform says and avoid so-called verification experts who don't represent Instagram and any of the other platforms. Also beware that, some experts hang out on social media too, and they can give some biased advice that will typically let you sign up for unnecessary items and services. For example, some claim that when you submit the application via an agency portal, that actually increases your chances. And actually, I wish it was true for the sake of our own agency revenue, but the fact is that using your own mobile device to request verification gives you the exact same chance of acceptance. I would also point out that you don't get verified because of my connections in the digital marketing world. You just get it, in most cases, because you truly deserve it and you've attained notability.
Let's talk budget. How much do people spend on average to gain sufficient PR for verification? What would you say is a realistic average?
Well, because people's PR levels and situations are not the same, it's hard to define a normal range. For example, we've seen people verified with very entry-level PR efforts, and it costed as little as $1,500. Then we've had others that had to go on to spending about $9,000 to achieve that. Most people would agree, and certainly from the cases we've seen, a legitimate influencer would also need around 6 to 10 articles in the news. So keep in mind that by default, some media articles cost $500 to arrange, whereas others can easily cost $20,000. And I'm not going to mention the name of those companies right now. There are also things that I can arrange affordably, which other agencies might need to pay for a lot because we've got certain connections. So it really depends on the circumstances of the client and the connections that the agency has got.
I think it is worth running people through the process we normally follow and how long it takes so they can have realistic expectations, right?
That'll help a lot, Audrey. I think you're familiar with it too. So if you want, you can share this with people now.
Well, once we receive a client order, they get a brief template from us where they can express their wishes of what they care about and what they want the media to know about them or not. And after that, we brainstorm and process certain ideas for them to approve. So then the next step is quite simple, actually. The journalists will access the brief, provide interview questions to the client, and formulate the stories for the news. Once it is all complete and approved by the client, it will go live in the news. The client can simply use their own mobile device to request verification. Our process typically gets done in 7 days, whereas a verification after submission can take another 5 days.
That was spot on, yes. Obviously, some clients need more time to get their content approved by campaign managers and by partners. So we're not insisting on a 7-day completion window. It is entirely up to the client if they need more time. On this note, I do want to thank everyone for tuning into the podcast. When you order our service, you'll see that it's very streamlined. And after handling so many cases, we are, after all, we are one of the biggest agencies for this particular service. I myself am available for email support, although my availability by phone is rather limited given our scale. The good thing is that our journalist team and our case managers are fully capable of supporting you each step of the way. So if you feel verification is a good next step to take, we're ready to assist you with that.
Yeah, that pretty much sums it up. Social media verification really appeals to people and businesses from around the world in all sectors, each of them facing different circumstances, really. Keep an eye out for our FAQ section on the website, as it is always updated according to the latest facts we have on these cases. And lastly, feel free to send us an email with any further questions. Thank you.